All right, so for this part of the coil pot, you're gonna need the same tools that you had for the bottom half. You're gonna need your sponge, your rib tool if you have access to it, your popsicle stick, if that's what you have, your fork, and then if you have access to a needle tool. So these are ceramic tools that we have access to in the studio, and these are items that you should have at your house. So of course you can adapt to basically anything that has kind of a straight edge and anything that will allow you to scrape the clay. And of course you need your slip as well. So if you don't have any slip made, you need to go ahead and do that. And it looks like I need to water my slip down. Ooh, baby. That is dry, dry, dry. So if yours gets a little bit dry like that, yeah, definitely stir it up. If you need to add some more clay to it, you can do that as well. But remember, it should be like pancake mix. So I'm going to need to spend a little time smoothing that out. So what we're going to do is you have this section of your coil pot completed. You smoothed in the inside, you smoothed in the outside, and you put it back in your bowl. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take paper towels, plastic, an old t-shirt, anything you have, some old foam, bubble wrap, you know, the little pillow packages full of air that you get in the Amazon boxes, those would work. Anything like that, you're going to put it inside your coil pot here. And because what that's going to do is it's going to help support it, because we're going to flip it over and we're just going to set that aside. So we're just flipping it over and we're setting it aside, and that paper towel that's on the inside is going to keep this from collapsing because this is still a little bit wet. So we're just going to set it aside, and we're going to recreate the bottom half of our coil pot. So I'm going to put my plastic back down inside there. Actually, I'm going to flip it over because this is kind of moist, so I'm going to use the other side. And if your plastic wrap got all messed up, just get a new piece. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a coil and I'm going to create the foot. So we're doing the exact same thing. So if you have this part done, then you are ready to go. And you know exactly what to do. So remember the foot, you don't want any spacing in between this, so make sure that it's nice and tight. The coils are right next to each other as you're wrapping this up. I'm going to check it with the foot of my coil pot. That's a little bit big, so I'm going to take it back down. And I'm going to smooth all of this out. Remember, I'm going to score the top outer edge of my foot, and I'm going to slip, and you could slip before you score, which is normally what I do. I don't know why I did that, but and then we're going to put our coil. I'm actually going to score this bottom section too a little bit. Do you guys see how this is getting a little bit thin right here? So I'm going to take a piece of coil and I'm going to thin it out just a little bit. And I'm going to add it in that area. I could add a whole coil, I guess, around the whole inside, which maybe that's what I'll do. But if your wall gets too thin like this, then when we go to attach the top, that could be a weak point and it could collapse. So I'm just going to thicken this up. I think when I use that pups, my coil is probably a little bit too thin with that I added, and so that is probably that was the problem, not probably the problem. So I should have used a little bit thicker coil, because when I pulled it, I thinned it out, and we still have to smooth the outside of this. So you want to make sure that your coils are thick enough that they're going to be able to handle that. So if it gets a little bit thin, just like you did with your pinch pot, go back in and just kind of patch those areas with some clay, but make sure that you have it smoothed in really well, or else you're going to cause an air pocket. Now that we have the outside smoothed in, we're going to pop this back over, just like we did the top half. We're going to put our plastic rack back inside our bowl. We're going to put the piece we just made inside the bowl. It's going to be a little bit bigger, remember, because you spread it out, so you're just going to kind of gently get it back down into that bowl. You can use your sponge to kind of help with that. It's very gentle, though. You don't want to put a hole in your wall. And now we're just going to kind of clean it up. And I don't like that little circle on that. I mean, you're not going to see it, but I would know it's there. And then if you need to do any patchwork, this is the time to do it. So just kind of feel your clay wall. And if you feel anywhere where it's thinner, then that's when you need to take a little piece of clay and we're going to patch it up. Your clay's moist enough, you don't need to score and slip this. At this point, we've got two sections of our coil pot. This one is a little bit more drier because we made it last week and we let it set up. So we're going to do the same thing to this pot. We're going to let it set up, and then next week we're going to come back and we're going to attach both of these pieces for the belly of the coil pot. Make sure you cover everything. Do not spray any of it. Wash your tools, pack it up, and I'll see you next time. Okay, so we're back and we've got both parts to the belly of our coil pot made, and we let this one set up just a little bit, so now they are both at the same dryness. But just like we did last time when we filled this one with paper towel, we're going to do the same thing to this guy because we want any kind of extra support that we can get. So if you don't have access to paper towels, any kind of extra plastic, bubble wrap, that stuff that you get from Amazon, anything that you can put in here would work. So you just want to make sure they have some kind of support. I shouldn't say anything. I would stick to paper towel or plastic because it is going to go into the kiln and we don't want crazy fumes happening. So paper towel is probably going to be your best bet. Or newspaper or magazine or anything like that will work. So now what we're going to do, now that we have our 2 pieces, and you can get rid of this if you want to, we're going to attach these right here at the rim. So remember, we're making this section of the coil pot right now. So we're going to take our slip and we're going to put it on the rim of both of these little pieces. So they kind of look like little bowls right now. And, you know, if we weren't making a coil pot and you were making bowls, this would be a great way to do that. And now we're going to score this. Now this is a really important part. You've got to make sure that you're scoring this well enough, or this seam, this joint that basically you're making will fall apart. So make sure that you're scoring and slipping adequately. Make sure you're actually creating some texture and you're actually pulling some clay. That way when you put these 2 pieces together, that joint, that slip gets down in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to put one on top of the other. And try to line up your seams. So you don't want it overhanging one or the other. I'm just kind of using my palms to kind of help with that. And if you've got a bowl, like a piece, one or the other, that's a little bit more wet, put the one that's has more moisture in it, put that one on top. So if you put it on the bottom, it's going to collapse. So this is what you have. You have like this Pokemon ball shape. And some of you are like, oh, I like it, I want to keep it. But we're not making Pokemon balls in high school studio class. So flip this back over. Oh, this is my more moist side, so I want this to be on the top. So now, at this point, we are going to score this seam right here. So we need to be able to connect one piece to the other. So we're going to score and slip this, and we're going to add a coil right here, and that's going to be the attachment point. I'm just going to make sure that my seam is scored up enough. If I see any spots where it needs to be, just doing some little circles here. Tim sees one. I saw him at a conference one time, and he was talking about how he scores the seam of his attachments, and he does it with little circles. And I thought, oh, that's pretty brilliant. But Tim makes these incredible teapots, and he's a funny guy. But ceramic artists, we get all nerded out and we go to these ceramic conferences, and NSYNC is a really big one. Unfortunately, got canceled because of COVID this year. But anyway, so you learn a lot at stuff like that. So now what I'm going to do is, you could have put some slip on there before we scored this, but then you want to be able to see that seam and make sure that you got it. So I like to slip afterwards. And if you have slip kind of oozing out from whenever you attached your 2 pieces, then you don't necessarily need to add more. But I didn't have that problem, so I added a little bit more slip. And now I'm going to take my coil and I'm going to press it gently, as always, on the seam of my 2 pieces. And that slip should help hold it on there for the moment. And I am pressing just a little bit as I do this. Make sure it's right on the seam. And then I'm just gonna cut this. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but I like to cut my coils at an angle. I just kind of overlap it and then I cut it at an angle. And then I take that little piece underneath out and then your coil matches up. Well, it should match up. Stretched it out a little bit when I did that, and then it matches up for you. So we're just gonna go around and make sure this is on the seam. The next step, I'm going to just gently press to make this just a little bit flatter because it'll make it easier to smooth in. Plus, I'm pressing it against the clay wall and maybe hoping that I'm eliminating any air pockets that might have got trapped between the wall and the coil. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my pulling technique. I'm going to support my clay because I don't want to knock it off my table or anything like that. And I'm going to push and pull up. And I'm going to overlap. And I'm going to do this all the way around. So notice that I'm not stopping like right there. I'm going all the way up to the foot as I do this. And don't worry that it's sticking out a little bit because we're going to pull the bottom half as well. If you push in on your clay a little bit, it's okay. Yours should probably be a little bit more stiff than mine because you let it set up longer. Just be gentle. Don't get in a hurry. You can pull the clay down from the top too. And just continue this process. Notice at this point I'm just kind of going back through and I'm just trying to kind of level out the clay surface. I'm not going to get too hung up on it because I have to do the other side still, but you can take your popsicle stick and you can help smooth that out if you want. If you have a rib tool, you can do the same thing with that. But again, I'm not going to get too hung up on it. It's going to look worse before it looks better. So I'm just kind of smoothing out these big chunky areas. If you get clay built up on your popsicle stick, just kind of scrape that off because it'll mess up your clay because it'll leave marks in it like mine was. So clean it up every now and again. And it's normal for you to take clay away at this stage because there's still a lot of moisture in the clay. It just happens. Okay, so now we have like this little mushroom guy happening. So we're going to flip this over. And we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to pull the coil up, and eventually this will be all smoothed out, and we won't be able to see it. So again, don't stop here. Make sure you're making those pull marks all the way up to the foot. And at this point, that coil should start to kind of disappear because you're pulling the rest of it to this side. Half of it went on the part we did previously, and then half the coil is going to come onto this pot. Make sure you overlap. Notice I'm using kind of the side of my knuckle to kind of push that clay in and smooth it out, take any extra that was really lumpy, kind of comes off. So I'm applying a little bit of pressure. And now at this point, you can take your popsicle stick and you can start to smooth all of this out. Again, you shouldn't be able to see where that coil is. And whether you're using a rib or a popsicle stick, you want to always make sure that you go both directions. So go horizontally with pressure and then go vertically with pressure. So we're compressing that clay. We want to remove any fingerprint marks. And if your clay started to slump a little bit, you can just take your palms and you can just kind of press it in a little. Flip this over. Reshape it a little bit. And then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to do some more smoothing. Once you have it nice and smoothed out, then we're going to get rid of these crumbs. So I'm going to spray my pot, spray my sponge. I'm going to go in and I'm just going to kind of give my sponge a little, or my pinch pot a little. It's not a pinch pot. My coil pot a little sponge bath here. Get rid of those crumbs. You know, don't put too much water on it though, because you don't want your pot to collapse here. If you get like a stubborn crumb, just go with your fingertip and go in a circular motion. Give it a little massage. It'll go away. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. So you guys have your coil pot inside your bowl for support, and I unwrap mine, and mine is still a little bit moist, so I'm going to dry it out a little bit. So I'm going to use a blow dryer to do this. Sometimes I would use a heat gun, but those heat guns get really, really hot really fast, and with beginners, they tend to put too much heat on their clay, and then they end up drying it out too fast, and then it results in cracks. So a blow dryer is a really good substitute for that. I like to do it on high for, you know, it depends on how dry your clay is, so you're just going to have to kind of pay attention. But as I'm drying it, I also do some compressing and smoothing all at the same time. So let's take a look at that in case you need to do this. So now that I've dried out my two pieces, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to do a little bit more reshaping just in case it got lopsided. So I'm just going to use my hands to kind of pat it to get it to the shape that I want. If you have access to something that you can kind of tap the clay with, that would be fantastic. But your palms do the exact same thing that this paddle is doing. So I could just go around and I could just reshape it in this motion as well. Okay, that is much better. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put it back in my bowl now that I have it reshaped. And I'm going to let it sit in there while I do this top section. Okay, we've come to a section where you have to make a decision in regards to design. So if you want to follow me exactly, that is perfectly fine. If you're a little bit uneasy about the process, then I would encourage you to do that. So I'm going to build this style of coil pot with this style of neck, just because for beginners, this is the easiest way to go. So we're going to add one more coil on the outside of the previous one that we just added. However, if you want the neck of your coil pot to be a little bit taller, so something like this, then you're going to keep adding your coils directly on top of that previous coil. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a little bit. Also, if you want more of this style of coil pot, you're going to want to make the hole larger than what I did on the example. You can also do something like this. So you could make the coil pot go really, really narrow. So you're going to have your coils going further in on the previous coil when you attach it. So we'll talk about that. I'll show you those steps, but I'm not going to actually physically do it to my coil pot because this is the one that I'm going to be building. Let's get to it. So at this point, we have the body of our coil pot made. So here we are. We're in this section right here. We've got the body, we've got the foot, the belly, the body, whichever one you want to call it. And now we're going to start constructing the neck of your coil pot. So you kind of already have kind of a circle happening because of the base of the bowl that you use probably, and that's perfectly fine. If you want to use that as your guide, that works. Especially, you know, if you're at home and you don't have a template, you can also use any kind of like plastic lid from, you know, sour cream containers, whatever. If you're on campus, I'm going to tell you to use a glaze lid, and you want to put it up because you don't want to put it down, because if there's glaze on the lid, then you'll get it on your clay. So we're just going to kind of line it up, and then we're going to take our needle tool, and if you are at home, you can use your popsicle stick, or better yet, you can use a pencil. That would work really, really well. So I don't know if you guys have caught on yet, but you don't necessarily have to have like official ceramic tools to build in clay. In fact, a lot of ceramic artists, when they first start, they might have tools from like college or stuff they've accumulated from friends, but you have to kind of adapt, you know, because stuff is expensive. So now that we have our line, our guide, if you are at home, you can use a knife. You can use your pencil to kind of carve that out just real gently. If you are on campus, you can use a needle tool, and or you can use an X-Acto knife. So, you know, a butter knife works really well, an X-Acto knife works really well, and a needle tool works really well. So I'm just going to use a needle tool, and I'm just going to follow along where I made that little stencil. And it's okay if it doesn't look too great. And then you're just going to kind of pry that out of there. Now, if we were going to do like lids or something, this would work really well for your flange. But we'll talk about those flanges. What are they? We'll talk about those later. So now we have the guide for the opening of our coil pot. So it's getting exciting. It's becoming a pot. It's becoming very real. So we're going to take our slip, and we're going to put it right here along this edge and a little bit on the inside because we're going to be attaching stuff. And if you're using paper towels, you can leave this in here. But if you have anything else inside your coil pot, you need to take it out right now. Because when this fires, this will burn away. And paper towel, paper is perfectly fine. Because we do have a vent, but anything else would just cause, you know, really harmful fumes, and we don't want that in the studio while we're working. So, and even if your clay is stiff enough, you could even take this out. Mine's still a little bit moist, so I'm going to leave that in there. But ideally, you would remove that stuff. So at this point, of course, I'm going to score. And here you could have scored it first and then slipped if you wanted to, if you've gotten into that habit. Because that's usually what I do. And then we're going to take our coil. So if you don't have any coils made, you're going to need to make some coils. And we're going to set it so it is right lined up. So you can use your finger to line it up with the edge on the inside of the coil pot. So I just use my finger, and there shouldn't be any space in between the wall of the pot and the coil. So you're lining it up. Because we want this part of the pot to start going up. And so now you're going to do your pull mark. So just like when you did the wall of your coil pot, we're going to support the inside here, and we're going to pull this clay down. Be careful, make sure that it's still lined up on the inside. That's why I have this finger here to keep it from moving, because if you push too hard, you're going to push that clay in. But if you have your fingers on the inside for support, that will not happen. Support the inside. Push in just slightly and pull down. Notice that I'm not stopping right at the coil where the coil stops. I'm going to pull that coil down into the belly of the pot. And I'm overlapping those pull marks. And you can use your thumb or your pointer finger, whatever is most comfortable for you. Whatever you can grip. And sometimes if you're having a problem, you can also use your popsicle stick. You can push and pull. If you have a modeling tool, it will do the same thing. So push and pull. I don't really like to use those because I like to be able to feel the clay. So remember, clay is very much a medium that relies on the sense of touch. You need to be able to feel it so you know what you're doing. You'd be able to feel the thickness of the clay wall. It's very much about sensory. So I'm just going back in and I'm just kind of smoothing all this out. And then I'm going to take my popsicle stick, if that's what you have, and you're going to smooth, compress that clay, and go back through with your sponge and smooth that out. If you have access to a rube tool, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to compress that clay. Don't worry about the crumbs. Go horizontal and vertical. Notice that I'm supporting the inside of this coil the entire time. Because if you don't, that coil is going to move on you. So we did the outside of the pots, now we have to do the inside. So I'm going to support the outside and I'm going to pull down. And this is the other reason you might want to take that paper towel or plastic or whatever it is that you have on the inside of your pot out, because sometimes it gets in the way of your pull marks. And then I'm going to go back in and I'm just going to smooth this in. I don't want to be able to see it. Maybe I'll just push it.
Ba ba
paper towel out of here. I'll leave that bottom section, but I need to get into this bottom section to really make sure that it's smoothed out. So just use your finger. You can use your popsicle stick too. You can use your modeling tool. I think my finger works the best though. I'm just trying to get in there and smooth that bottom edge out that we didn't get to with that paper towel. And I'm just going to kind of shape this up a little bit. It's really thick right now, but we're going to thin it here in a second because we are going to pull this coil onto the pot just like we did that previous coil when we added that first coil for the neck area. Alright guys, so at this point I took my coil pot out of my bowl because I don't need it anymore because this has set up. So now what you're going to do is you've smoothed in the neck of your coil pot, and so now you need to spend a little time just getting this thinned out so it is the same thickness all the way around. And I did that already, but that video somehow got deleted. So I'm just going to kind of walk through it without kind of messing this up. But you're just going to go back to your pinch potting skills, and we're just going to kind of pinch out this rim so it's the same thickness all the way around. And then of course you want to go ahead and smooth it out, and you can use your popsicle stick, your modeling tool, your rib, your sponge, all of those things to help you get this nice and smooth and get this the same thickness all the way around. But when you do this, as always, make sure you're supporting this underside of the rim and the lip, because if not, you're going to end up pushing this down as you smooth this, and then it's going to be, you know, way down here. So always make sure that you're supporting as you go. And I tend to kind of use this part of my hand as I'm kind of smoothing this out and getting it so it's the same evenness, and really rely on that sense of touch. You know, kind of, if you need to close your eyes even or look away and just kind of feel that clay. And if you need to add some clay in those small spots, you go ahead and do that. If your rim is a little bit uneven, then maybe add a small amount of clay right there and smooth it in. Just make sure that you really compress it so you don't end up with a crack or an air pocket. So while you're working on that, I'm going to go do some editing. Alright, so you have come to a stopping point, and now what you're going to do is you're going to set this on your board and you're going to cover this up. You are not going to spray this because we built the bottom half, put it together, and then we built this top section. So we need this top section to lose some of the moisture so it can catch up with this bottom section of your coil pot, because we dried this to kind of push it into the next stage so we could add the neck and the rim and the mouth. So our next step is to get our pot to the leather hard stage, and then we will do our carvings. Alright guys, so you have your coil pot put away, covered up, so it can move into that next stage. Remember, you're not spraying it with any water because we want it to lose its moisture. We want to push it into that leather hard stage so we can do our carving. And I think it's always important that you know kind of where you're going so you can kind of plan for that. So here it is. We're going to add some really cool patterns on the surface of your coil pot, and in order to do that, you really need to prep for this. So in the next video, we're going to talk about how do you create a really great repeating pattern by breaking it down into simple lines and simple shapes in order to achieve something kind of complicated. And we will go over all the ways to do that. So that's going to be in the next video, but we can't do anything to our pot anymore until it moves into that leather hard stage. So stay tuned, cover your pot, put it somewhere safe, and we'll get back to it.